They always do that. They think, wow, we lost all of our reputation because we're pathological liars. Once the problem is over and our line is of no longer any use because it serves no purpose, because Biden is gone, the Democrat, then we'll restore our credibility by being investigative reporters who tell the truth.
Hello and welcome to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. This is our Friday news roundup where we look at all the news of the week, and we got lots of news on the agenda. Trump rolled out his tariffs this week, and the elections in Wisconsin and Florida took place, the special elections. And we had Tesla protesters this weekend. Those are the stories we'll start out with, so stay with us, and we'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. Victor's the Martin and Neely Anderson Senior Fellow in Military History and Classics at the Hoover Institution and the Wayne and Marcia Buske Distinguished Fellow in History at Hillsdale College. You can find him at his website, victorhanson.com. The name of the website is The Blade of Perseus, so please come join us there. There's lots of free material, and then there is the subscriber material, 2 articles a week, and a video exclusively for our Ultra subscribers, and we would love it if you would join us there. Well, Victor, we had lots of news this week, and I thought we'd start with the Trump events, and those are, he rolled out his tariffs, and I wondered if you had any reflection on that. What was that?
Liberation Day.
Yes.
Well, there's 2 things about this story. One of them is class. So the investor class, and I mean, it overlaps. There's a lot of working people that have 401ks, but I'm talking about the big investor class, the Wall Street Journal class. They don't like any of this. And they believe in the following, that absolute free trade, whether it's fair or not, is good for them, because they feel that if other countries subsidize their products, it's not sustainable. And they have a point there. I mean, if you look at the per capita income of China or Europe or Japan, it's less than ours. I mean, the only ones that have higher are these artificially inflated oil sheikdoms. So we have a dynamic economy. Number 2, they feel that it keeps the domestic supplier competitive. He always has to compete against unfair advantages, and they feel that it gives consumers a break. Everything, go to Walmart, half the stuff's made in China, cheap. Okay, it's true, but it comes at the expense of displacing working class people, or at least relegating them only to lower paying service jobs when we could be making all of them. We used to be the biggest shipbuilder in the world. We built 27 Essex carriers in 2 years. We built the USS America. At the time, it was the most sophisticated cruise liner in the world in the 1950s. So we can do it. So the people who want jobs that are well paying want a Liberation Day, and the people who offshore, outsource, and are investing class don't. But the majority do. That's number 1. And the second thing about this is it will succeed if he keeps using the word parity, 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 symmetry, 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 because what the left is doing, and people on the libertarian right are suggesting that everything was normal and we were getting along, and then this disruptor came in, this crazy Trump with this 19th century Taft type of tariff, right? And he screwed everything up, and he alienated the Mexicans and the Canadians and the Europe. And what is he doing? No. The situation was not stable. We were running a $1.2 to $1.5 trillion trade deficit. We were $37 trillion with national debt. The interest on the debt, and it could go higher. It could really go higher. It was larger than the defense budget, and we were spending $3 billion a day printing, borrowing $3 billion to pay the interest on our larger borrowing sum. So Donald Trump is saying parity. And they always say, well, the old order, the rules-based order, the transatlantic the transatlantic alliance, the rules-based order was not lawful. It wasn't based on rules. It was based on America's a big, fat, wealthy, naive sucker. And we in the Canada are going to we're going to get 63 billion, and we in Mexico 170, and we in Europe 200 billion. And then they're going to subsidize our defense. And if they don't like it, we're going to say, you're Donald Trump and you're a disruptor. Well, no, 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 no. It's time for an accounting. So if he can say, I am not a disruptor, I'm a restorer. I just want to have a general rule that anybody who and he's going to announce it as we're speaking. Anybody who has a tariff will have a tariff. Anybody that doesn't, we won't. And it will be just about the same as your tariff. It might even be what he called generous tariffs. Generous tariffs are we are a little lower than yours. That will be a persuasive point.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on this recent election, special elections in both Florida and Wisconsin, and especially the Crawford election to the Supreme Court of Wisconsin?
Well, in all special elections, and that's defined by not federal elections or state elections, that's usually not defined as the 4-year presidential election or the 2-year midterms, which coincide with state races, but just special ones to replace people. Usually, the Democrats do better because their voters, what they tend to be more they're smaller turnouts, but the turnout in those elections tend to be more motivated on the left. Problem that the MAGA movement has, it's brought in so many new people that they will vote in a presidential election. Young people, Hispanics, African American males, but they're not going to turn out just for one particular election. So we knew that Wisconsin was not going to win. Now they're crowing that the 2 Florida seats they had once sizable margins of 30%, 25%, but the Republicans only won these red seats by 14 and 17%. That's bogus because incumbents, regardless of what party they're in, if you're there forever, like Mike Waltz and Matt Gaetz, you just keep building up, building up. It's like our congressman here, Jim Costa. He's been there. You're not gonna. It's very hard to defeat him. But the point I'm making is that if you get a newcomer in an open jungle race, I mean, he still won by 14. That's a blowout. But because he didn't win, the left is trying to say that it doesn't mean anything. It's going to give them, with Stefanik's retention of her seat, 3 more seats. It'll be a more comfortable margin. So I don't see any big deal. I looked at the polls today. There's only one outlier, Gallup, and he has Trump down by -8 or something. But most of them they're either dead even, or he's up a point or down a point, and that's pretty good given the chaos that the media has portrayed.
The media has made a lot as well of the Crawford election based on, they think the Supreme Court apparently will okay the new apportionment that will get rid of 2 Republican congressional districts. And I was wondering, is that how you saw it? Do you think that it's as significant as that?
Well, the Supreme Court has no authority on the congressional districts, the number. Those are set by the census, but they're going to redistrict 2 that may now. They can redistrict it in a spaghetti fashion or a jigsaw puzzle fashion that would give them 2 more seats within the static number of seats. California is going to lose. And by the way, blue states in general, over the next 5 years at the next census, if the population trends continue, i.e., blue state people are less fertile and blue state people move to red state, if that continues, they're going to lose 10 seats. The census will require them, that is the left. But it was too bad that Crawford won, but it was nullified by the fact that also on the ballot they had a requirement for you have to show an ID to get an absentee ballot or mail-in ballot, or to show up in the early voting in addition to regular election day voting. And that was far more important because that is going to be very hard for the Democrats to massage. They really fought that. That won by 62%. So if they keep saying there's never any fraud, you're racist, you're xenophobic, you've made all this up, and then they fight they fight requirement of a license. I just went into the supermarket the other day. I saw maybe 4 people with checks, old-fashioned checks. They had IDs. Why did they do that? It was so racist. Voting's not as important as buying food, right?
Yeah, and it seems to be broadly supported that people would like to be sure that they are actual citizens, so they're not taking the right of voting from citizens. So, Victor, let's turn then to there was the big Tesla protests this weekend. I think they turned out to be a little bit underwhelming myself, and there didn't seem to, in fact, Fox News suggested that at least one protest, all the protesters left at 12 o'clock as though they were being paid and on the clock. I was wondering your thoughts.
Yes, there were 2 other indices that suggest they were less than spontaneous. They showed a picture of a person with a menu and it was printed out. Say this, do this, and then all of the signs had what pre-printed and they were similar. So somebody is doing this, and I don't see why they can't get them on RICO or racketeering, interstate conspiracy charges, because even if their claim, well, we didn't know they were going to cut the charger cables. We didn't know they were going to, they knew. We didn't know when we just said we're going to take him down, we didn't think that a lot of people would key his cars. But you could say in court, well, did you say anything after this phenomenon, this epidemic of keying cars? Well, we didn't know it. Well, no, that's not going to stand up. But so more importantly, they are trying to systematically destroy a brand, and they're trying to do it in 3 different ways. They're saying if you have a Tesla, you might not be able to charge it because we'll cut the cables. If you want to go in and buy a Tesla, to pick up your Tesla, we're going to be there and we're going to try to harass you. And if you own a Tesla, we're going to try to run you off the road or key your car or damage it. And that will suppress sales. Or number 4, we're going to so demonize Elon Musk and the brand that you just won't feel giddy of having the best EV on the market anymore and saving the planet. This is what everybody's remarked about. He was a heroic Olympian god to the left because he actually took all of their highfalutin, abstract nonsense about EVs are going to save the world, and he actually translated that into a car with a 330-mile range. I used to drive a 1963 Volvo third hand that my father bought for $800. And it had a 10-gallon gas tank, and it got 28 miles a gallon, 280 miles. So 330, I mean, that's not great compared to modern cars, but that makes it possible to do places. And I don't know why Mercedes or none of these people can, it's sort of like can rival him. It's sort of like SpaceX. The Euro rocket that was launched in Norway, it went, and I hope that he gets competition from Jeff Bezos and the other competitors that are private and Boeing, etc. But so far, whatever he's doing, it's in the Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, Alexander Graham Bell mode. I don't know how he does it, but it's pretty spectacular. I just don't know why people on the left wouldn't say, well, you don't have to take a chainsaw, Elon. We knew that there was all this waste, and here's a proposal. We have gone through the whole government, just like your Doge do, but we're more kind and compassionate and sober and judicious. But here's our alternate, and we can get the same reduction. They have no idea. Instead, they want to pay. They just always want to pass bills. And it's like, where does the money come from?
Well, Victor, let's go ahead and take a break and then come back and talk a little bit about the deportations that are going on. Stay with us and we'll be back. Welcome back to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. You can find Victor at X. His handle is at VD Hanson, and on Facebook at Hanson's Morning Cup. So please come join us there. He's also on YouTube and Rumble, so you can catch Victor Davis Hanson podcast shows in video on YouTube and Rumble. Victor, we've had lots of news this week on deportations. I would just like to update the audience on we've got Trump has deported over 100,000 and he's arrested another 110,000 illegal immigrants. So they are working on the deportations very quickly. It's only been approximately 60 days. But we've had, I think his name's Jamie Raskin in the Congress, demand a return of the deportees from the El Salvador prison. And we recently had news stories about how they have a father from was it New Jersey? Maryland, sorry, a Maryland father that they arrested. And finally, Joe Rogan, who sometimes comes out on the wrong side of things, has said, well, they've arrested, he called him a gay hairdresser, I believe, but he's actually a makeup artist, and that they arrested him and sent him to El Salvador. And so Rogan was complaining that this is beyond the pale. And I was wondering your thoughts on any of those new cases coming in and just general reflections on this.
Well, he had gang insignia allegedly tattooed all over him, but he's been on the straight and narrow, he claims, since. But he's here illegally, and he entered illegally, and he's residing here illegally. And he can say all he wants, but if he's here illegally and he had a gang affiliation and the gang is a terrorist designated organization, what does he think is going to happen? But why don't his defenders say, well, we have no problem with deporting him because he came here illegally. He has no right to be here. But let's just tell us El Salvadorians to check again and see. They're experts. They're the experts. They have all sorts of data files. Just see if he's in the files. If he's in the files, then keep him there. But if he's not, then just send him back home. But why would you make the argument he should come back here when he's here illegally? Which is another. I get my friend Gary wrote. He writes me a lot. He's a very good guy, very smart. And he said, "Isn't there an all not an amnesty, but is there a different category?" And I wrote about that in Mexifornia 22 years ago, something to the effect that of these, and by the way, we had 30. The Yale study years ago said it wasn't 20, it was 30 million. So you bring in 12, we probably have 40 million here illegally. But there is a large number that might fit the following categories. They've been here 5 years, A. B, they've never committed a crime. C, they're not on any public assistance. D, they're working. If they're working, if they're not on public assistance, if they have no record, then why not say to them, if you pay a fine, I don't know, $4,000 or $5,000 for breaking our laws, we will allow you to apply for a green card. Under the Simpson-Mazzoli Act of 1986, when that amnesty went through, only 33% applied for citizenship. Because I mean, we have so watered down citizenship, and the distinctions between mere residency and citizenship are almost non-existent. And the dying citizen, I asked, what can you do as a resident that you can't do as a citizen, or vice versa? And there's almost the only thing I could think of is run for office and vote in federal elections, but you can vote in local elections now. So it's been watered down. I think most people would just get a green card and then deport everybody else. And I think that would be a fair thing to do. But here's the catch. I don't know if Joe Rogan would support that. I don't know if the libertarian right would support that. I know the left wouldn't support it. But why would you want somebody in here who is on welfare, or who has a criminal record, or is not working, or just got here under the Biden regime? Just send them back. And they have an incentive. They have this executive order that says if you get caught here illegally and you are deported, you're going to go into a database and you can't come in under any circumstances for 10 years. And in some cases, people are actually going back, self-deporting. That was what Mitt Romney said. Remember in 2000, he was for self-deportation.
Well, if I can turn to another subject on the treatment of prisoners, and Also, just sort of because I feel Joe Rogan needs a perspective. He's talking about the exception to the rule of the people that have been sent to the El Salvador prison. And if we turn to Hamas prisoner that was just taken, he was a protester against Hamas and he was a Palestinian. And they didn't wait for anything. They tortured him, dismembered the body or tore the body apart, and then to terrify everybody and his parents, dumped it at the doorstep
With a
of his
note,
parents.
this is what happens to Hamas critics, and threw him off the roof. And it wasn't one or two. I think a whole mob of 30 grabbed him. These are the same people who, when they release a hostage, they all get in their camouflage and they do their goose step and they all have their mask on, and then they're so terrifying, they think. And then when they actually are mobilized, two things happen. They kill their own people as bullies. And then when the Israelis come in, and as we speak, the Israelis are going in there to destroy Hamas. They understand that. You got to go into the tunnels and destroy them. Then they go back into the tunnels. It also raises a very interesting question. Of the 11 million or so, 10.5 million Israelis, residents, citizens, there's about 2 million people, tends to be in northern Israel for the most part, that are Arab Israeli citizens. I'm not talking about the Druze, but from the West Bank, or that multi-generational, a few of them had been there since 1947. Okay. What is their attitude about all this? Put it this way. If you were a person on the West Bank and you wanted to speak freely, either criticizing Hamas or criticizing Israel, and you were living, you moved over to Israel, and you were one of the 2 million Arabs who often demonstrate, to whom would you fear? Would you hear Hamas? So if you were a Hamas supporter and then you were disillusioned, like this person, and started criticizing them, would you be safer in the Jewish state criticizing Hamas, or in the West? Obviously in the Jewish state, but go one step further. If you were criticizing Israel, would you be safer in Israel and Hamas criticizing Hamas, or in the West Bank or Gaza? And the answer is only in Israel would you be safe. And that's why every time there had been a discussion about the actual course of the Sharon fence, and it went into villages, especially in the north, and people, yeah, they had to decide where it would go, include this village, include that village, exclude this. I went there in 2006, I think, or six. People were protesting, and I asked my IDF person, look, they're protesting against Israel? And he said, no, they're protesting. He said, no, excuse me. He said, yes, they are protesting because they don't want the fence to exclude them from, I said, from their home and their brethren in the West. No, from Israel. Israel. They want to live in Israel. And I said, why? And he said, well, hang on, Victor. So we were driving through the West Bank, and he said, now we're going to go into Israel. And it was like night and day as far as everything.
Yes, that's
So they know
crazy.
that, and that's what's the irony of the whole Middle East.
Yeah, Israel is a place of law and order.
It's the only place of law and order. The only place. There are places in the Gulf, but you can't say anything about the regime, or you might be chopped up in the Turkish embassy.
Oh my gosh, is that the Saudis you're talking about? Well, let's turn, speaking of law and order, to
Oh,
Europe.
wait a minute. I want
Oh,
to say
sorry, go ahead.
one thing about law and order. I was gone, and I mentioned that in a podcast, and I've been here since 1980 as an adult, right, in this house. So I've been here 45 years as an adult, but I grew up here just down the road. So I was here say 70. I can remember, I don't know, 65 years of this. Not on one case had the sheriff, had more than two sheriffs ever come out, but three sheriffs, not on any case have they come out. They came out here and said somebody had called 911, because that was swatting. That's what they do. They said there's somebody here, or intruder or something. And the other thing is, I've noticed in the angry readers, I haven't been doing them for the website. The tone is now different. It's not just you are a F black. You know what I mean? I give them an angry reader score, but now it's beware, watch out. And that's a little weird. And I think what I'm getting at is there's something going on in the country where the more politically estranged and neutered and emasculated the Democrats are, and the more that their street theater in Congress, the Jasmine Crockett, the Jeremy Raskin, the Chuck Schumer, we're going to, go down and get in your neighborhood, or we're going to get in your districts, Republicans, or screaming and yelling, Al Green trying to shut down the Trump joint session address, the kickboxing video, the SHIT senators, the more that turns people off, the more violent they get. This reminds me of the iterations of the French Revolution. So they are really, the left is really going back to their golden moment from June, July, August, September 2020, when they got away with everything. And this is very ironic because they said that anybody on January 6th that even went into the Capitol, even if they had nothing to do, that'd be like saying, hey, I'm Pam Bondi. Somebody threw a Molotov cocktail at that dealership. I don't care if you did it or not. If you were near there and you were demonstrating, we're going to indict you. And then we're going to put you away for 4 years. That's what I'm getting at is somebody's going to have to stop it and tell them, if you continue to engage in terrorism and swatting and threatening people, it's going to get very scary. I'm afraid that they're going to cut off some woman because they always do it with women. They don't do it with some big burly guy in a Tesla, but they kind of cut off and then they run back and ran. I think some armed woman's going to shoot them. Heaven forbid, because she thinks she's going to be killed.
Speaking of Pam Bondi, then before I go on to the European Lawfare, she just recently said they are going to seek the death penalty for Luigi Mangioni, that
Let me
killer of
think.
the
The death
healthcare.
penalty says first degree murder, which means it's premeditated and planned. So he scouted out. He wore a mask. He was off the internet. He brought a satchel of food and weaponry. He went into a hostel or something, tried to hide himself, and then he scouted out the place, and then he waited, and then he dispassionately, without emotion, shot a aspiring middle class kid who made it pretty well on United Health, who ran a pretty good company, and now he's a hero to all of the left. Isn't that first degree murder? Or is it because the left now is the party of oligarchs and aristocrats and say, well, he went to a good university. He's good looking. He's wealthy. He's liberal. His family is one of the good people. That's what they're saying. They're so strange. I mean, if there was some guy from southern Kentucky and he got angry at a George Soros like figure or somebody and he went out and did that, they would be saying this person should be tortured. They would. They have no consistent anything. It's like Jasmine Crockett screaming about they can't hold judges responsible and the judge's will goes and you can't personally attack the judge and you have to play by the rules. And and then Daryl Isaac takes 1 nanosecond to quote her what she said about attacking judges and impeaching them and
Yeah,
both.
she was a co-signer of a bill to impeach the
Kind of like
justices.
Barack Obama. You remember during the funeral for what's his name? He said, we got to get rid of that. You got to get rid of that filibuster. It's a racist relic. Racist relic. Got to get rid of it. Why would you let a couple of crazy people obstruct the majority in the Senate? And then 1 nanosecond, never bet against the internet. 1 nanosecond after he said that, everybody has a speech when he was trying to stop Alito when he was in the minority and he was filibustering. Filibuster is a good way to stop the tyranny of the majority.
Oh, I love that internet. All right, so to turn to law and order in Europe, and the Europeans seem to be taking a page from the playbook of the U.S. left, and they are using lawfare against many of their candidates. And there are many of them, but I think I noted the big one was Marine Le Pen, who has been charged and found guilty of embezzlement, according to a French court, and they wanted to take her out. And I was wondering your reflection out of the race or candidacy. And I was wondering your reflections.
Yeah, they're saying that her EU funds as a member of the EU were used and they didn't have a complete paywall. In other words, she did something maybe like Hillary Clinton. I don't think she even did that. In other words, she gave money to the DNC, who gave it to Perkins Coie, who gave it to Fusion GPS, and then gave it to Christopher Steele. And then they said, I didn't do it. But it's so weird. The Europeans do two things. They say that they are preeminent as defenders of democracy and that we are subverting it with Trump. And they can't list anything Trump did that subverted democracy. And then two, they are independent. They are pace setters. They are not emulative. They do not follow the United States. And what do? They look at the 4 years of Donald Trump out in the desert and at as Judge Kaplan and E. Jean Carroll as Fannie Willis and Judge Engoron as Judge Merchan and Alvin Bragg as I should say Letitia James and Fannie Willis, Nathan Wade. They all go after him and they tie him up for 4 years. They try to take him off the ballot. They raid, and the Europeans go, I like this, especially when one of these right-wing guys or conservatives can win. Now, if they're marginal, we play by the rules. But if they, so the Romanians took Mr. Georgescu, and he came out of nowhere. He was right. He won the first round. He was going to win the second. Oh, he's a Russian. I thought they wouldn't be so shameless to say Russian collusion. He's a Russian collusion. He's Putin's puppet. They just copy everything that here. And then the alternative for Deutschland, it gets, as we said to Jack the other day, it get 20% of the vote, 150 seats. It's the big enchilada. Who would want? Wouldn't the Conservative Party want to? No, nobody can touch it. It's kryptonite. Do they think that's going to stop those people? They're going to get 40% next time. But that's very anti-democratic. Now we put her in jail, house arrest for 2 years, and then suspended sentence. And then, oh, wow, she can't run right when Macron will be running. So, and then the other thing is, Turkey is just kind of canceled their elections. Well, I mean, they didn't cancel. Erdogan put the mayor of Istanbul in jail, and everybody's protesting, and they want Europe to condemn it, and Europe will not condemn that. And why? Because they look at the 32 nation NATO and they say the Turks have the biggest army, and now they've got a fledgling big defense industry, and we don't want to arm because we're socialist utopians, and it's good to have these crazy Turks. And why would we want to be principled opposition to Erdogan in defense of democracy? That's not who we are. We're crass opportunists who make everybody feel guilty with our highfalutin castigization. Nobody takes those lectures seriously anymore. It's like the Europeans. I did one. I think I mentioned. I won't mention the person, but I did an interview with a hostile British. When you talk to them, they don't want to talk about it. Well, let's just have parity tariffs, and let's just have parity. Let's have parity tariffs, and let's have parity in everybody equity. Everybody pays 2%. We decided to do that 11 years ago in 2014, but 9 of you don't do it. There'd be no problems in the world. You just pay your 2%. We have no tariffs. You'd be like the United States, 2% or nothing. We have the fewest tariffs. It's so bizarre. They're so angry at us when we have the lowest tariff system in the world. They have one of the highest, and they think we're unfair because we complain. And now there's a New York, Did you see this? The New York Times ran a secret history of the Ukraine war. Now they tell us. They knew it at the time. And it turns out that Joe Biden and his generals and the left were lying about everything. There were Americans that were inside Ukraine targeting Russian assets. There were, and telling them the relative degree of importance they were to the Russian military and which type of ordnance to use, British, French, American. And they were inside Ukraine advising them, and we were channeling money that was not really known to the American people, in addition, probably through USA. But the point was they weren't talking about any. We were heavily involved, and they had been getting warnings from the Russians. You better be. They knew all this, and they were saying, "Oh, they're just braggadocio. They would never do anything." So they got us very close to the brink. I wrote a column and I said, "This is very strange. What's developing in Ukraine? We're breaking the protocols of the Cold War, which said that two nuclear rivals will never use a proxy on the doorstep of the other power and arm it." And when Russia under Khrushchev did that in 1962 in Cuba, John F. Kennedy said, there's not going to be missiles in Cuba. Excuse me, Cuba. Be no missiles in Cuba. We won't have missiles in Cuba. And so he stopped. He went to DEFCON 2 to stop that. My point is that putting arming a proxy right on the doorstep of a nuclear rival is sort of what they did with Cuba. I know that some of you are going to say, well, Victor, he was a communist dictatorship, and Zelensky is a what? Oh, I'm sorry. He's an elected president who holds regularly scheduled elections. There's a vibrant political opposition active in Ukraine. There's a free press, and there's habeas corpus. Oh, none of that? None of that?
None of that.
And the United States is applying the Israeli model to our proxy. We're using Israel. We like the damage they're doing to Middle East terrorists, who the sort of the type people who hit us on 9/11. So we have certain rules with Netanyahu, so we do them with Ukraine. So be careful about Ukrainians. Be careful about collateral damage. No, we don't say that. Ukrainians, you must have a ceasefire. There's a million. It's not like 40,000 or 30,000 death. There's 1.5 million casualties, dead, wounded. You've got to have no, we don't have a ceasefire, do we? You got to be like Netanyahu. You got to have a coalition. No, we don't say that to Zelensky. You better have an election. It's the most bizarre thing in the world. You should read that article, everybody, about the secret history of. I couldn't believe that all these left-wing venues. They were all telling us how wonderful the Ukraine war was and how principled it was and how transparent, remember Joe Scarborough said he'd never seen a more fit. And now all of a sudden these books come out, these articles come out. The Ukraine war was kind of like the secret bombing of Cambodia under Nixon, and Joe Biden was non compos mentis from the outset, and there was a cabal. Molly Bird. It's really weird. They always do that. They think, wow, we lost all of our reputation because we're pathological liars. Once the problem is over and our line is of no longer any use because it serves no purpose, because Biden is gone, the Democrat, then we'll restore our credibility by being investigative reporters who tell the truth. And they never rat themselves out. It's kind of like Gavin Newsom's newscast when he got up there the other day and he was talking with, is it Bill Maher? And he said, our brand is toxic and we've gone too far to the left. And I thought, well, who gave 500 million in special monies to illegal aliens? Who created a reparations committee? Who blew up 4 dams on the Klamath River? Who's trying to blow up 2 of them up in Northern California and Napa, Sonoma area? You are. Who was the one that bragged about California was going to be a refuge and not comply with bans on transgendered biological males? He was. It's.
They just use that word toxic and they don't have any thought behind it whatsoever.
He should have just got a mirror if he was going to be honest and looked in the mirror and said, Gavin, you're toxic. And then Gavin would say, no, I'm not, Gavin. You said, yes, you are. You had reparations. You blew. No, I didn't. And that would have been much more honest.
You sound like you would think he should be Smeagol Gollum.
Smeagol talking to himself. Except the good Smeagol, I mean, there was the bad Gollum and the good Smeagol, but he's bad, bad. Unless he does that and says, I'm going to talk to Smeagol Gavin, and Smeagol Gavin says, well, you can't, you shouldn't blow up dams. They give you electricity and recreation and agricultural irrigation supplies and flood control. And then the Gavin, the bad one, says, yeah, but the left, we want to restore California to 1848. And then Smeagol Gavin says, but we have the fourth largest reserves of natural gas and AI. It needs a lot of electricity. We could go in the Monterey Shale formation and make huge clean burning natural gas and have big AI farms and keep all those jobs high paying from. And then the bad Gollum Gavin says, no, we're not, because it's going to heat up the planet, and I'm not going to fight with those crazy people in Marin County and the Sierra Club, save the earth. That's how they are. He is a schizophrenic, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
You have to hand him credit for saying that men in women's sports, it was unfair. I definitely feel
After
that was
he
unfair.
ensured that he would resist a federal order, yeah. He's going to try to run for president, and no one just says to him, you're the one that did it. Even Michael Savage and, Charlie Hurd and all of them, they say, you are the one who did it. If he asked me to be on there, I would say that to him. I really promise my audience, I would say, you did it.
I don't think you're going to be asked to be on his show.
I'm so hurt.
Last thing before we go to a break, you were talking about Russia and the Ukraine war. And this week we found out that Trump's peace deal in Russia is on a very thin string because Russia has said that the peace with Ukraine doesn't address the quote unquote root causes of the conflict.
The root causes
there's two things. There's that.
And then the root cause. We want all of Ukraine. That's why we try to take Kiev.
And then the second thing is the United States policy is to try to use sanctions to press Putin in his coming into these peace talks. But China's supplying him.
I know, but this is the yin and the yang of any discussion. It always, any discussion to end, it's like the Russo-Japanese War we talked on our Saturday edition. They went back and forth, Versailles Treaty back and forth, armistice back and forth. So as soon as he criticized Zelensky and said Zelensky should have never, he said, you don't have the car. Then Putin thought, I'm going to get on my hind legs and start making greater demands. And now he's criticized Putin. He said, I hope that's not true. He's going to be in big trouble. Then Zelensky says, well, maybe I should be in NATO. And I don't think we need more money out of that rare minerals deal. And we need more sophisticated weapons. So whatever side that you chastise, the other one then gets on their hind legs and gets emboldened. But it doesn't change the strategic calculus on the ground. If you're a Harvard professor, Graham Allison, or you're Jakob Gregel, all these people who write extensively about it, most of my colleagues at the Hoover Institution, they're all on the same page. Ukraine is on the same page. Everybody knows, 1, it will not be in NATO. 2, it's got the most effective military in NATO right now by being outside of NATO, and it will be fully armed. 3, Vladimir Putin military was embarrassed and it's shell shocked. It will recover, but it will never be able to take a fortified and fully armed Ukraine. Number 4, it is wearing Ukraine down. 12 million people have left. It's got 10 times the GDP. It's got 30 times the area. It's got 4 times the population. It will eventually grind them down. I don't think it can take the whole country, but it can kill a lot of more people than it is. And number 5, everybody knows the peace. The peace is, you stole Crimea and you stole Donbass, and Obama let it happen, and Trump never said that he should go to war to get them back, and Biden didn't either. So you've got them. You got your 8 million speaking Russians. They're back into your Russian fold. Okay, we got that. And the question is, how far will Putin go backwards. So wherever he goes back to his embarkation point, you have a DMZ like Korea, and you have a hot peace. It's not a good peace, but it's peace. It's like the Koreas. You have a DMZ, and then right next to DMZ, you have a rare earth mineral corridor of economic activity. And if and that's about what you're going to get. And they all know it. So what are they fighting over now? They're fighting over Putin wants to get as westward as he can and get as much territory, and Ukraine wants to push him back. And that's about it. They're fighting over Mariupol and Odessa and make sure that all that Ukraine has ports. And it's going to happen, is what I'm saying. And when it happens, we know what will happen. They'll say Donald Trump had nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with it. He's still Putin's puppet. It's Putin's puppet. It's Munich. It's a sellout. It's appeasement. And then they'll go along with it. And then we'll have an end to 1.5 million dead, wounded, missing, and killed. The meat grounder, the Stalingrad, the Verdun, the Somme. But
Yes.
no, it's so
And
weird about leftists. They're so self-righteous and anti-war, and yet they really went into this war. And do they think that a horrific existential war is better than a messy peace or a hot peace? I don't understand that at all.
well, I was wondering because Russia's actual claims to the root causes might have something to do with the territory that it feels like it needs in order to have those warm water ports that it's always seeking. It looks like if you look at the Black Sea, that the Ukraine got all the best territory when it had the
It has
Crimea.
Crimea right now. Crimea's got
True,
Sebastopol's a great.
but that's one of the arguing territories that they
No,
argue
they're not.
over.
No, we're not going
No,
to get
the
back.
Ukraine has said, fine, Russia can
No,
have
but nobody
Crimea.
in their right mind thinks that Ukraine either has the power to get Crimea back or people are willing to arm it to get that power. And they realize that when the Soviet Union broke up, I think it was, I'm just doing this by memory, but I think it was somewhere between 91 and 93, there was a Republic of Crimea, kind of like the old Byzantine period when it was independent. And both Russia and Ukraine wanted to steal it because they knew it was weak, and Ukraine beat them to it and absorbed it. Ukraine absorbed it, took it. And as far as the Donbass, that was part of Russia, and Nikita Khrushchev was born near the border of Ukraine and Russia, and he wanted, as a gesture to the Ukrainians, because they had always had a liberationist movement. They were joined the Nazis in World War II. A majority of them did. So he wanted to make sure it was quiet. So he changes the internal borders of the Soviet Union so that they could say the Donbass is part of the Soviet Socialist Republic of Ukraine. And that's what they did. But the whole border thing is completely, if you go back, it's just a mess. And as I mentioned before in this podcast, Western Ukraine until 1939 was Roman Catholic, European, and Polish speaking. And Stalin invaded it in cahoots with Hitler on September 1st of 1939. By the 20th, they controlled it. They split it in two. After the war, Roosevelt and Churchill said, hey, Joe, we're now going to respect the original borders and we're going to take into account Poland is a free country. It was invaded by Germany and you, so you've got to give it back. And Stalin said, how many? It's Roman Catholic and it's Polish speaking. He said, how many divisions does the Pope have? Try me. And so then they said, oh, we're sorry, Joe. We'll take East Prussia and Pomerania and give the whole thing to Poland, and they'll come out about the same. So Ukraine, there is a Ukraine in the center around Kiev that's been there for a millennium, but the periphery has undulating borders. It always has.
So then I just want to ask you, and I know we kind of probe this question all the time, what Putin is up to, but what is Putin up to given the fact that he is being supplied by China with what he needs? He's got greater numbers. He's winning right now to the extent the war is being fought right now in the Ukraine. He's gaining territory.
Because he's got to go back to the Russian people. And I think his numbers are quiet, but there are we've had people at Hoover have said this that have been over there. I think there's probably 1.5 million casualties, and somewhere around 900 to a million are Russian. By casualties, I mean the wounded and the dead and the missing and the sick. So he's got to go tell the Russian people, I did this. I preemptively, and here's why I did it. And he's going to have to say, I got them out of NATO. And some people say, well, I don't think they were going to be in. Yes, they were going to be in NATO, but only my invasion stopped it. Okay. And I got back the Donbass in Crimea. And they're going to say, well, we already had them. He said, but I institutionalized it. You'll never go back to Ukraine. Okay, but still, that wasn't enough. And then he's got to say, I pushed the borders from Ukraine even further to the west. And that's what he's trying to do right now. He's trying to terror bomb, send rockets, drones, kill civilians, and he thinks he has momentum and get his each mile, so he can go back and say, okay, I hit the magic point. Now I'm this many miles from, he's going to say, I came in 100 miles. I got back for this special military operation, got 100 miles. And so Trump, when he ostracized Zelensky, he knew that Putin was going to take advantage of that. So now Putin has taken advantage of that. And now Zelensky is back on his hind legs and says, oh, you're going to get tough on Putin? Then I'm going to take advantage of that. So what he's going to have to do is get tough on both of them. And what he's going to have to say is to Zelensky, if you're not going to cooperate 50-50, you go deal with your beautiful Europeans. They talk a great game. They all have togas. They have robes. They're philosophers, but they're not going to put on a camouflage uniform and get in a tank, a Leopard tank, and go over there and fight those Russian drones. They're not going to do it. I can guarantee you they're not going to do it. They're not going to take 1,000 of their sophisticated jets and start running missions of ground support. I can guarantee you that. They're not going to do it. Those horrible Americans that you hate and make fun of, they're the only people that have the wherewithal to deter Russia. That's what he's got to have to tell him. So you're going to have to go, and he's going to have to tell Putin, we're going to embargo your oil. And I don't mean your oil. I mean India, who buys your oil. I mean China, who buys your oil. I mean Iran, who buys your oil. Anybody who buys a freighter full of oil is not going to have any trade relation for the United States. And he's threatened to do that. And that will stop his oil, especially if the United States, and this is what I think Trump is doing, because he is a businessman, he's now demanding open ANWR, get this Keystone settled. Just, we had a new federal lease. The lease was $40 million sale. So he wants Russian oil off the market so the price goes up so he can supply it and get the price down with additional American oil. So that's what he's going to do, and I think it could work. I don't think it's going to work tomorrow, but there's no, see, the left always says, remember Joe Biden, how long is this going to go on? Until what it takes, until it's over. We'll give them whatever it takes. And you think they had no plan. It was just feed the meat grinder. Kind of, it was very similar to the first battle of the Somme or Verdun. They just kept feeding it and feeding it and feeding it, and it was madness.
I think Putin's only going to stop when his people get angry enough at
I
him.
think they're
And
very
that's,
angry at him because the moment he stops, it's like musical chairs. As long as he can say, I'm engaged in a special military operation to recover Russian population that was stolen from us and get territory and treat Russia with respect, and then it's peace. And everybody said, how many people got killed? Tell me how much money we spent and how many miles did you get for each dead Russian? And that's what he's afraid of.
well, Victor, we received news this morning about Trump's plans for Iran, and we'll go ahead and talk about that when we come back from these important messages. Stay with us and we'll be back. Welcome back to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. Victor, so we got news, and this is, I don't know, it might be hearsay, but apparently a man by the name of Dan Hodges told, I saw it in the Daily Mail, that he knew that Trump might bomb Iran, and he had gotten that from Israeli sources. So that's where the story came
Well,
from.
everybody, I mean, I think H.R. McMaster has said that publicly, that they're going to have an operation before the end of the year. So Trump has said to Iran, here's the art of the deal. Just cut off Hezbollah and cut off Hamas and cut off the Houthis and stop the terrorism. You've shut down the Red Sea, the Eastern Mediterranean, and you're just let Lebanon live. And we have no problem. And then just don't make a nuclear bomb. That's all we ask. And Iran looks at themselves and says, well, if we don't have a bomb, we can't threaten people, and we can't say we're going to destroy the Zionist entity. We're nobody. We're just a corrupt kleptocracy. I guess corrupt kleptocratic theocracy with all restive population that can't even keep the power on. So they don't want to do that. So he's got now two. He's got one. Is it the Carl Vinson, the new one, the Gerald Ford? That's the Gerald Ford class. That's 105,000 tons, 80 Super Hornets. So we get another one in there. Maybe it's the Carl Vinson. It's almost as big, Nimitz class. So you'll have 160 planes, and then in addition to that, in Qatar and all of the round bases that can hit it. Diego Garcia, you probably have 4 or 5 bombers that can hit B-1s, that can hit, bring in the 30,000-pound mother of all bombs, the bunker buster. So they're building up this huge arsenal in that area. And it's pretty impressive, but I don't know how long you can reach maximum alert. You can't just take, this huge amount of men and material and get them to a high readiness and then just stay there for a year. So if he's really building up, as everybody says, and the Arab nations are reporting that there's hundreds of cargo flights going in to regional airports, Jordan, Israel, and they're getting all of their anti-missile batteries, Patriots, THAAD, everything, because they don't know whether they do have a nuclear bomb. But if I were Iran, I would cut a deal because he's going to, if they unleash this, and we know what Trump told the Taliban and we know what Trump told Putin before, but I think he's got a list and he's said to them, we're going to, first of all, take out your nuclear. If you continue to shoot, we're going to take out your oil facilities. If you continue to shoot, we're going to take their military bases. If you continue to shoot back, here are a list of all your theocratic, wealthy enclaves, and they're all corrupt. It's kind of like Malibu or Beverly Hills and the hills around Tehran, and we're going to do it. So please, it's your choice. How that will play back here, given the signal conversation with J.D. Vance and all of that disagreement about the MAGA. MAGA is Jacksonian, don't tread on me, no better friend, no worse enemy. It's not optional military. So there'll be people in the MAGA movement who will say one of three things. How much did this cost? 50 billion? So you're cutting 50 billion? Or they will say, we don't start fights, we end them. Or they will say, you're working for Israel. So they've got to be very careful how they present this. And they've got to say, we do not want a nuclear Iran supplied by China, so that you have a quartet of 4 nuclear powers: Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. And we know what North Korea does in its neighborhood. It causes nothing but trouble. Terrifies the South Koreans, the Taiwanese, the Australians, and the South Korean. We don't want that in the Middle East, because if they get a nuke, Israel will build even more nukes, but more importantly, Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, they're all going to want to go nuclear, and they all have the money or the expertise to do it.
To what extent do you think that this was an accidental or a leak that was not supposed to go, or was it something purposefully put into the news media to get Iran to rethink its?
Well, the bombers have been photographed on Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, so they obviously didn't put them in bunkers to hide them. And the cargo flights are not coming in at 2 a.m, so that people at the various regional airports are seeing these huge uh, C5s probably coming in with all sorts of stuff, and they want to be seen. That's the point. So they're ramping up pressure, 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 and we'll see what the Iranian people, maybe they can, I hope they have some type of information campaign, leaflets or constant internet telling the Iranian people this is what's going to happen to you if you keep going with these crazy theocrats.
So a purposeful insertion into the media of a threat to Iran that Trump might do that.
Ratcheting is like an old ratchet. You're ratcheting up the pressure very slowly, and you're going to see who blinks.
And to what extent do you think Trump, as a businessman, he's used to getting things done, and he just looked at the situation in the Middle East and said, Iran's the source, and let's immediately adjust our policy to address that source, and the addressing
He
of it
thinks
is
that
this.
Iran was empowered, and he's correct that Obama had this crazy, I'm just a community organizer. I'm always for the underdog, and the Shia and the Persian has always been treated bad. So what I'll do is I'll empower Iran with the nuclear deal. They'll get a bomb at the end. Then I can play them off against the corrupt Saudis and the Kuwait and the Arab Sunni overdogs. They're just like the bankers in Chicago. And so you need street, and then we'll get the Israelis on their side too, and then they'll have creative tension. And then they're going to call somebody up to adjudicate. That's going to be me. That's how he thought about it. He really did. He saw no moral, political, economic, social difference between this renegade theocracy in Israel or even Jordan and Egypt. He created it, this monstrosity. So, I mean, it was always that way. And so Trump people came to him and said, it's never going to, your Gaza, Gaza is Vegas or Gaza is Miami. It won't work with Iran in the neighborhood because the Houthis will still bomb it or they'll do anything. The only thing you have to do, you have to go cut off the head of the snake or the octopus in the head or shell up the big spider. You've got to hit it in its face, and then the little legs collapse. Otherwise, you're going to be dealing with Houthis and Hamas and Palestinian Authority and Hezbollah forever. And I don't know if you can do it or not, but if Trump is walking a tight wire, everybody should realize that because he inherited an unstable Ukraine war. He inherited this war in the Middle East. He inherited a 37 trillion. Not that he spent a lot himself, 5 trillion because of COVID, but it had to be addressed. And so everybody's saying, blaming him after what, 80 days and say it's his fault, his fault. No, no. But he's actually proactive. He knows something. If he can get $500 billion cut this year, $1 trillion cut next year, and control spending, and right before the midterms, forecast a balanced budget. And if he can get even a ceasefire where there's nobody dying, and when there's nobody dying and there's a ceasefire, then the truth comes out in war. And there's going to be the most horrific stories coming out of what happened. And they're going to hear all sorts of embarrassing stuff about the Biden administration, the Europeans. That's what happens in war. The truth comes out even during a ceasefire. And if he can get Iran neutralized or neutered, those three things alone will be amazing. And if it's true that he has $3 to $4 trillion in foreign investment, and most people say 10 billion get you 1 million jobs, and you get 20, 30 million jobs that could be, it would be astounding. And I think that's really why, and this is all aside from emasculating the whole left-wing project and its incestuous relationship with government NGOs, government, USA, universities, institutions, it's all part of that nexus. If he can cut the Gordian knot, just cut it, then that will be amazing. And my only suggestion is I would cool the 51 state Panama, invade Panama, absorb Greenland, third term talk.
I was
I
going to ask you
understand
about
that
that
it's
third
it's
term
all
talk.
chaotic and it keeps people off their guard. And yes, Donald Trump would say to me, "Well, Victor, Why do you think Denmark just gave Greenland $1 billion? Why do you think they're giving more aid? Why do you think that's happening? Why do you think that we're in these negotiations with BlackRock buying the entry and the exit to Panama? Maybe they're going to try to welch out the Chinese. They probably are, but we're talking about it. And why do you think that Canada and I are discussing what would be the appropriate tariff rate? Why? It's only because I was crazy. So
I think those
I did read Art of the Deal and I did read Art of the Come.
I did think those anti-Hamas protests that took place in Gaza were part of Trump's influence, though. I think that it gave people a sense, right? That to the extent there's any anti-Hamas
I said
people
that on
that
an earlier broadcast when he said, and we can just make Gaza like a beautiful, big, beautiful city, and it's got prime real estate, beaches, and they'll have to go be displaced for a while. And then we'll check people as they come back. And Netanyahu is going, yes. But he was so freaked out. And then the thing about Trump is, it's like he throws this gigantic rock into the pond, and all these ripples freak everybody out. And then they look at it, and it calms down. I think, wow, that was something. And now they're thinking about, and they're talking about, I think half the population of Gaza said they would like to leave and go somewhere else. And then the other they would like that. Yeah. If you could rebuild and make, I hope there's not one penny of American money. I hope it's all Gulf oil money. But Saudi should, instead of building this, $2 trillion Echo City in the desert that the Saudis are building, it's never going to get built. They should just go over to Gaza and do it and make an Echo City and then get an all-Arab police force to keep out Hamas. But they can't do it because none of them are legitimate governments. There's no election. So they're always afraid they have no public support.
Well, the last thing, or the last two things, one is smaller issue. Hegseth has ordered the same standards for both men and women in the military, and I was wondering your thoughts on that.
He's going to be hit, but I will tell you a secret.
Tell me a secret.
When this women were going to be placed in combat units, I was in an audience where I heard, I think, two generals speak. And the general said the following: we support equity, but these special forces, there is a degree that they must attain in physicality and combat effectiveness. And yes, you can enhance them by getting brilliant women who are sober and judicious in decision making, or they'll look at a map and see insights, but they also have to have the physical element. So they said, we have no objection to it as long as they meet the physical requirements. So then what happened under Biden? Immediately they realized that 90% of the women probably couldn't make the physical requirements. So then they attacked the physical requirements. And they said, they didn't just say, these are for men, these are for women. They lowered them. But there was more competition with the men, so that didn't really affect the men, but it brought a lot of women in there. And Pete Hegseth said, if you're a special forces team or you're a combat team, you're dropped in, you want everybody to be able to win a knife fight, cut the guy's throat before he does yours. So it's equity. And this is at a time, remember, when everybody is saying that biological males have no advantage in female sports. We're told that again and again by the left. Remember that? Oh, that's just not right. They have no, women can do anything. If that's true, then there's no problem because women will easily pass the same physical standards.
So
And
we'll see how that
everybody
works
grew up
out.
with sisters and they all knew the sisters beat them up. Is that what happened? I
I
don't think so.
suppose.
I don't, unless they were 10 years older.
Right. And the last thing is my favorite story of the week, that federal employees, as you know, Trump has forced them all to return to the office, and they're coming back and they're complaining that bathrooms are not clean enough for them, trash is not taken out enough for them, and that these abandoned buildings still have
I
maybe a
wonder
few
why that
rats
is.
in it. And they're
Yeah,
so incompetent. They're
it's
such
like
complainers.
so I have this old Victorian farmhouse, right? And I think I have 4 bedrooms, and then I have 2 annexes, six bedrooms. I don't know what, I have an outdoor bathroom, 6 bathrooms. And I leave for about 3 years. And then I say, you know what? I think I'm going to go back to my place of occupation. And I come in, I said, oh my God, it's not clean. Who left there's a rat in there. There's a mouse. The toilets need cleaning. And it's like we had no responsibility to clean up our own workplace or get back there to ensure that doesn't happen. It's just going to be some poor guy who has to go in there and clean. Don't they have any sense of obligation to keep their workplace clean? Why wouldn't they go in there? Why wouldn't they? What did they expect? That everybody was going to say, well, we'll just come up here and clean when there's nobody, not one soul here. Let's just clean it for the moment. Golden. So the thing about Elon Musk is he has 65% innate support for cutting. All he has to do is get the messaging right. Get the messaging. The messaging is we just want federal workers to be treated exactly like, no better, no worse than people, all of you in the private sector. And you know that if you sell cars or you work for the power company and you don't go in for 2 years and you look at your PG&E truck, what it's like sitting in the parking lot, and then you blame people they didn't keep it up for you while you abandon it, or you haven't been in the sales room in 3 years and suddenly you go to your Carol and you say, oh my gosh, it's not the same. Well, what did you expect? You just were going to abandon for the rest of your life and just sit home in your pajamas and do Zoom?
Yes, and it shows you what little princesses they were as hired and federal employees as well.
I just read stuff there was that story also about the air traffic controllers that they had a fist fight in the tower at Reagan Airport and they expelled one guy. And you would think that after that wreck, that tragic, horrific, preventable accident could have been prevented, that nobody ever would get in an argument in that control tower. Not that it was their fault, or maybe it was, but to have a fist fight, that's a federal employee. I was talking to someone the other day, and it's so funny about people on the left, and they said something to the effect, well, I don't fly because of the Trump air traffic controllers. I'm thinking, the Trump air traffic controllers, I mean, the last 80 days, they all of a sudden took off their little caps and put on MAGA caps, and now they belong. No. They were not hired in the last 80 days. Their protocols were not made in the last 80 days. If you mean that people came in there and were horrified of the quality of people that were there and that had the greatest number of near misses in history the last 4 years, over a 4 year period of the modern era, and you don't think that it's going to be disruptive to try to tell them that they have to behave and be professional, and you get new avionics and compute, that's going to be disruptive. The improvement.
Yes,
But
and
he didn't
Trump,
cause the problem.
no, he didn't. And he said he's actively seeking to let in all of those who were denied because they weren't the right race or the right gender, et cetera. They missed the DEI quota
I don't think people
qualifications.
realize United Airlines was bragging that 50% of all the people that were going to be admitted to their pilot training programs were going to be DEI. They were going to be picked on their gender, their race, their sexual orientation. And they had literally thousands of white males who had military experience. They were pilots, they had been air traffic controllers, and they couldn't get a job. And it was, I don't understand that.
So Trump's probably going to get some good people that were overlooked because of DEI
That's
policies.
a larger issue. I was thinking of that the other day when I looked at his cabinet and I saw the Energy Secretary, Rubio, Bondi, Hegseth. It's not like 2017. There isn't a Rex Tillerson. They don't have the corporate Steve Mnuchin. They don't have him as Secretary of Treasury. Besson is really good. There's no Rex Tillerson types. There's no Besson. There's no Washington apparat. There is nobody like Bill Barr, whom I had no problem with. I know a lot of people, listeners are very angry at him, but there's no Bill Barr and there's no John Bolton. And then in the military, there's no John Kelly, there's no Jim Mattis, there's no H.R. McMaster. Okay. So what I'm getting at is this cabinet is very different. Number one, it's loyal. I don't mean that the others were disloyal, but they get an order. Their attitude is not Donald Trump is crazy. I'm the expert, so I'm going to try to find a way to nod to Donald Trump and then stop it. Or I have to turn it into bureaucratese and I have to modify it. But rather, this is what he wants. And I see if I can even improve on the efficacy that he expects. Number two, so it's loyal. And then number two, they all are wonderful communicators. They've either been in the public eye like Rubio in the Senate giving speeches for years on years, or they're Hegseth or Vance. They've been on television. They're expert communicators. And then three, they don't leak. There's no, I'm Miles Taylor and I'm a senior fellow. And that little minor guy in the Homeland Security, I think he was chief of staff of the Homeland Security. And remember, he was anonymous. We have an organized cabal inside that we're resisting everything from them. So my point is that he's got people who are good communicators, very loyal, and they're on the same agenda. And that's how he's able to do this. And this is a I know when you're in the middle of a revolution, this is a counter revolution. You don't really appreciate the magnitude.
What do you make of the people that they've turned from left, like Tulsi Gabbard or RFK Jr. or even Elon Musk? I know he's not part of the cabinet, but nonetheless, they've turned from the left and they've joined Trump's forces. There's no reason to be suspicious of them. There's no
Well,
reason.
if you were the people that criticize me when I'm at work, I, if I was hate Victor, I would say this. What do you think he endorsed him? Victor, he's head of HHS. You think Tulsi Gabbard would ever have been director of national intelligence, Victor? You think Elon would ever get a contract? So they all look at it as crass quid pro quo. I don't think so. I think it's more like David Sachs, who has a job at crypto, but it's more Mark Andreessen. It was more, the more I got to know the left, they try to destroy people. So when Robert Kennedy ran as a third candidate, they had some of the most vile, vicious hit pieces on him. Remember the bear and all? He killed everything, sex. His wife hung herself on it. It was just unrelenting. And Tulsi Gabbard was a flake that was named after tea, and she was, and they went after every one of them. So I think they just saw that these people are very vicious, and the right didn't do that to them. Even Bill Maher said that the other day. He said, I endorsed Obama. I endorsed Biden. I endorsed Clinton. I gave money to, I never got invited to the White House. And Trump invited him to the White House.
Elon has that same resume as far as his politics. He did the same thing.
He voted for Hillary, and he claims he didn't, but he's on record, I think, in a video that he did say that he voted for Biden. But he understood something when he got out of California. They were shutting down launches, at a federal base. They didn't want him, or they were he was going to have to hire LGBTQ XYZ people at his Tesla. He understood that. So he also understood another thing. When he got X, he understood that he was on the wrong side of the left, and he looked at what they did to Donald Trump, and he knew that that's what they do, and they would have him in lawfare, and he said that if Trump loses the election, I'll be in jail, because that's what the left is doing now, and I hope that they have to pass legislation that says that no local or state prosecute, counties, municipal, state can file a indictment of a president or ex-president, unless it's, I don't know.
Capital murder case or something.
Yeah, for anything he's done while he was president, I suppose. But when you have these freelancing DAs and you have the state DAs that try to take him off the ballot, and you've got rogue FBI agents at Mar-a-Lago, you can't do that.
Yeah, you sure can't. Well, Victor, we've come to the end of our podcast, and I have a reader who was talking about Signalgate, and he was looking at the possibility that Signal app was already on these phones. So maybe
Yes,
the old administration did a practical joke, but he brought up a historical
a
fact,
joke.
and that's what I wanted. This is a little bit of
What they
history.
did with Clinton did to Bush.
Yeah, hold on. So let me have this guy say it, but you're right. I was listening to your recent podcast regarding Signalgate and was reminded of the ridiculous pranks the Democratic staff did when George H.W. Bush became president. They removed the W key on the computers or tried to render the key dysfunctional. I thought maybe someone decided to pull a prank on Signal app, the phone of Walls, by putting in the phone number of the Atlantic editor. I agreed with your thoughts about this was too unique to be a mistake, with your thought that it was too unique. And thank you, David Kent-Smith, who wrote that to our
Yeah.
website.
Just a question. I think everybody realizes that Walz didn't want him on there and didn't know. And he said mea culpa, maxima culpa. He knew that he should have checked that. They should have had a little aid that said every 5 minutes, I'm just looking at all the people on this chat and I'm checking at their initials and their names. They didn't do that. They should have. And then it's just a question of how did he get on there and not, as I said on an earlier broadcast, 340 million other people. And the answer is he was Jeffrey Goldberg, hater of Donald Trump, who made up that story that Trump loves Hitler. I wish I could have generals like Hitler had. And he released that right before the election. Then the suckers thing and made fun of a gold star, all that stuff. That's what he does. So he was on there, and that was deliberate. Somebody put him on there. So the question is, what was the motive? Was the motive to achieve what was achieved, massive embarrassment, or was it a prank? Kind of, they thought that they would catch it, let's say. I don't know that answer, but I do think they're going to find out that there was some aid to Waltz that either was so derelict or negligent that he should be fired, or there were people in there that wanted Goldberg on it. The only thing I would say, finally, I'm getting tired of him being on all the news shows and saying how he's been attacked by people. No. All you had to do, you were on there for about 11 days. Any person with any dignity and professionalism, I don't care if you're a journalist, you are an American citizen. If you are inadvertently, you knew that in 1 nanosecond, that you were on a list of your government officials discussing an attack and you knew you weren't supposed to be there. It wouldn't have taken anything just to write an immediate email and say, hello, I am the editor of The Atlantic, Jeffrey Goldberg. I don't think I was intended to be on this, and I want you to verify that this is whom I think it is, and I will depart. And then he could have written a note and said, I was inadvertently, that's fine. But he sat there day after day after day, absorbing that, thinking, when does the big story come? And then it came. And so he's a disreputable person. He really is. And he acts like he's the wounded fawn now. He's on all these, oh, they're after me. Oh, they're lying. Oh, they're doing. And he actually said in his thing that it was classified. It was not technically classified. I don't know if that's a distinction without a difference. You don't want that. The embarrassing thing was that you heard people talking back and forth. If you actually read the transcript, it's no big deal. But they shouldn't have been able to read. Nobody should be able to read that transcript. And so I just don't like the idea that you say you're a journalist, and so and anything goes. You have a professional obligation to, I don't know, hurt your country.
Yeah. So we have to agree with David Kleinsmith, who is agreeing with us that it probably wasn't an accident, that
No, it
it
was
was
not.
no mistake at all.
It
So
was no
thank you,
mistake.
David, Mr. Kleinsmith. We appreciate the comment to our website. And thank you, Victor, for all of your thoughts today. It's been really very enlightening, as usual. Happy to
Thank
be here.
you. I'm on week 4 of this flu, and I got to get better because I'm sounding like a toad.
You sound pretty good. You sound a lot better than you did 2 or 3 weeks
Yeah,
ago.
well, I just have
So
no energy, but I sound like a toad or a frog or a salamander. How's that?
All right, Mr. Salamander. This is Sami Winc and Victor Davis Hanson, and we're signing off.
Thank you.